everybody, and welcome to the fourth session of SGO Virtual IBC 2020. Many thanks for joining us today. My name is Eva Panyan, and I'm Marketing Manager at SGO. Together with me today is also Cristobal Bolaños, our Mistika expert. And I am super excited to welcome professional colorist and HDR workflow specialist Francisco Ramos, also known as Paco, who will be doing today's presentation. Hi, Paco. How are you?
Hi, hello.
So
pleased to be here.
We are pleased to welcome you as well.
Sorry.
So for everyone who still doesn't know Paco, he has more than 10 years of experience in the industry, and he got familiar with Mistika starting his professional career as a product specialist at SGO. So Paco then continued his path as Mistika senior colorist and online stereographer at Sky UK, where he contributed to the launch of the Sky 3D channel, where he also completed color and workflow design for many renowned Sky productions, such as award-winning show Inside the Mind of Leonardo. So during the past 4 years, Paco has been working as a freelance artist, designing ACES color workflows for films like Unfortunate Stories and the Netflix series ACES. He is very involved in educational initiatives and helps to expand the Spanish knowledge base in offering ACES, SDR, and HDR color management trainings for companies in Spain. Paco is also involved with the International Colorist Academy as a newly appointed Mistika trainer, and will soon be announcing a new Mistika course. We'll make sure to keep you posted on that. So Paco, you promised us to talk about color management today. What topics are you planning to cover?
So what we are going to cover is we are going to show how to set up scene-referred workflows in Mistika. And basically, we are going to divide this into sections from camera scene-referred workflows to ACES scene-referred workflows, okay? Basically, the most important thing is how we're going to set up the working space, and then how we can use the tools within Mistika to tone map all the information of the scene into the displays we are targeting, okay? So that is what we are going to talk about.
Yeah, sounds so great.
Okay, so shall we start?
Yes, maybe just a quick recommendation before we dig into the presentation. I would recommend you to make your Zoom window full screen so you can see better all the operations that Paco will be performing in Mistika. And if you have any questions during the session, please place them in the Q&A panel that you can find in the lower section of Zoom window. We'll reserve some time at the end to answer all of them. Okay, so Paco, what is the best way to start designing color management in Mistika Boutique?
Well, in this timeline, we're going to see different methods of working in Mistika. And the first of it that we're going to work with is setting up a scene-referred workflow from a camera scene-referred workflow from a red camera. The first thing that I would do is obviously go into the settings of our raw parameters. And over here, what I do is choose the gamut curve log3 G10 and a red-white gamut RGB from the red camera raw parameters, okay? And that way that I'm going to define that in all my clips here, and that's where my color grade is going to work from, okay? So my color grade will be working on that data from the red camera. Then I'm going to have a unicolor effect. This unicolor effect is going to transform my scene referred data to the display data, which is going to be a Rec 709, okay, D65, with a transfer function of gamma 2.4, okay? And with another color grade node, which I've renamed as HDR Tone Mapping here, I'm going to tone map that information. And basically this tone map is actually the tone map that I'm going to use mostly around the whole show, okay? So by doing it here, I'm just going to show you the settings that I normally have when I do the tone mapping within the color grade of Mistika. And those are propagated in the other shots. Okay, so firstly, what I do here is I lower here my offset. Okay, so I basically set the black point of my image here in the tone map. And over here, I would start playing with my soft clip, okay? And with the soft clip, I'm bringing in all those highlights within the legal range of SDR. But as you can see, I'm lowering the image way too much, okay? So I'm really interested in kind of keeping the diffuse white where it normally should be, which is around 90% of the signal. Okay, let me move this a bit here so you can see this better. And you can see that by lowering that, if I click on one of the shirts, you can see that I've lowered that information just way too much. Okay, so what I do is actually move my soft clip pivot higher, normally around 75%. Okay, so then I can bring all that information, and now that diffuse white information is protected, and I'm not lowering it way too much. And I do recommend just setting those pivot points for this tone mapping operation, whatever it's best for your show in particular, and in fact play with it and try to maybe even impose a little bit of a look from here as well if you want to. Okay, this setting is a setting that I normally propagate to the whole project I do, but obviously most of the creative work would be done on the color grade that is working on the camera scene referred data. And that's where, for example here, well, I'm just going to get rid of that kind of magenta dominant that the picture has, maybe lower a bit the exposure there, and bring up the black point slightly a bit more, okay, and start playing creatively with this. Obviously, I would add vector number 2 and maybe play with my highlights and my shadows and do a little bit of an S-curve, and just maybe here quickly adding a little bit of mid-tone saturation, and maybe if I wanted to in my primaries, maybe already work with temperature to kind of define look on my image. Okay, so this is normally a stack that I would do and work with for an SDR setup, but it doesn't really need to be only for SDR. Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions for now, or is there anything you want me to explain again? You, Eva, and Cristobal.
I think that so far so good. Cristobal, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's clear. I mean, that's the way you basically deal with the lack of tone mapping in the unicolor, right? And that gives you a bit more flexible, because sometimes you have to go shot by shot base, right?
Well, it would definitely be an advantage to kind of set up on a shot-by-shot basis. Sometimes you don't really have the time. But as I said at the beginning, I do set that as my general tone mapping for the whole show, and only maybe in very specific moments I would adjust it to something else. Okay, to very specific moments. We will see now how actually we can do the same type of stack, but instead of going to an SDR, we're going to HDR. Okay,
cool.
So over here I have another stack, and what you're seeing here is obviously the HDR picture, and as you can see, obviously you're seeing it flat because we are transmitting this from an sRGB screen, and you're not unfortunately yet capable of getting this in HDR. but I'm gonna actually show here the guidelines of where my diffuse white should be, and also red dotted line that shows where my 1000 nit limit should be as well. Okay, so instead of going to SDR, obviously on the color grade node, I'm still working on the scene referred data and of the camera, and it's in the unicolor where instead of going to Rec 709, I'm going to a PQ transfer function. Okay, so if I did my grade here from this color grade node, and I see, okay, well, clearly I want to define another option here. Going to remove, as we did in the SDR1, that magenta fill that it had, and lower a little bit my black point here. But in my HDR tone mapping, what I'm going to do is obviously here, instead of video grade, I set an HDR mode. And in this HDR mode is where you can see my pivot points have positioned itself to another part of the image, okay? So over here now, I can basically define what elements of, I'm gonna reset this for a second and put this in HDR. Oops. Now, okay, there we go. And from here, I can now start playing with those highlights, how strong or soft I want those highlights to be in HDR, okay? And as well as I did with my SDR version, I could play with a soft clip to define what I want to protect from the images within the 0 to 200 nits of my original signal, okay? Maybe a better shot to view this on is actually this close-up, okay? I'm actually gonna bring the grade from the previous shot, okay? Whoops, went maybe way too blue there. Let's compensate for that, okay? And I'm gonna lift a little bit the exposure up, okay? As
we can see those highlights in the ring, right?
Yeah, so basically you can see the highlights of the ring here, that those highlights are almost hitting that 1000 nits marker that I have there. And it's actually there where I have the ability to, hey, start playing when I go to an HDR mode, start playing with those highlights and say, well, I don't want them to be so sharp and bright. So maybe the DOP is asking me, well, just drop them maybe to, well, let me show you here. There's nits as well, and just drop them to around 450, 500 nits. So they're not as bright as they should be, okay? And it's basically over here where you have that option. Obviously, again, you also have the option of even manipulating a little bit how, doing a little bit of a trim pass as well on your HDR monitor from this color grade node as well. And what we're seeing here on these two examples that I've just showed you of these two stacks, the only thing that has been different the two things that have been different have been the unicolor, obviously now targeting a new display, an HDR display. And the previous one, the SDR, was going obviously to Rec 709, and the pivot points. We were manipulating the pivot points, so that we were targeting the delivery display settings, okay? So, and in a sense, you could almost grade, if you wanted to, on the camera scene referred color space, and then change the unicolor and the tone mapping values to deliver a new version, okay?
Okay.
So yeah, definitely it's an advantage that you can, work with SDR and HDR version in the same environment. I guess it gives you the flexibility, and I suppose it's time saving at the end of the day.
Yep.
It does, and obviously with the right monitoring, it would really help to to obviously see those two versions at the same time.
Yep.
And actually the ability, I don't have it here on my home setup, but the ability of outputting one SDR signal and HDR signal to do a comparison of the two is actually really, really good.
Absolutely.
And the pivots give you that extra detail that you need, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you want that ability to fine tune, right?
Yeah, well, and actually, this is going to take me to the next point, and
cool.
and I think actually where it's really useful is actually in ACES workflows. So over here I have a third stack, and in this third stack we are changing things a bit. And as you can see here, I have, this is a unicolor where in the attributes, I changed the name of the unicolor to working space. So to define clearly that I'm changing the working space of the incoming effect to the color grade node. And what I'm doing is, instead of working on the redlog 3G10 information from the camera and red-white gamut, red-white gamut RGB from red, I'm setting my AP1 gamut and my output curve of this unicolor effect and the working space to ACES CCT.
Cool.
So now my color grade node will be working on ACES CCT. I'm gonna take off the guidelines, the HDR guidelines I have here, just so it's easier to see. When we go back to HDR, I'll show them again. And then over here in the tone mapping, what I've called tone mapping, so I've got the color grade, and the tone mapping is where I'm going to be exactly what Cristobal said. I'm going to creatively use my pivot points to set within the ACES space, try to fine tune how my image is being delivered, done in ACES. And here in Rec 709, what I have is an ODT. This is a Mistika ODT effect, where I'm obviously going from ACES CCT AP1 to Rec 709 ODT. Okay.
Cool.
And well, so if, for example, I start grading this a bit, although it already has a little bit of a grade here. Okay. And let's see, maybe the interesting side here is how I'm going to work with the pivot points in, actually, let me reset that subclip there. I have two vectors here, and in the second one is where I have my tone mapping. And it's actually here in the tone mapping where I'm going to drop my pivot points over here to more or less 55. Even you could type it in if you wanted to, because it's where normally in an ACES CCT code value around 55% is where that diffuse white falls. And my soft clip, in order to work those values slightly better, I'm actually gonna type it in and put it to 45, just as well as I did before by protecting the diffuse white values on my SDR stack before. But in this case, what I'm doing is I'm doing this in an ACES workflow. Okay, so the other thing as well, you can set up actually here to see the scope from input or from output. So as soon as I play here with my soft clip, I can see there if I'm bringing within those pivot points that I've set the image as I wanted to, okay? Or if I really want to bring this up and say, okay, let's just take advantage here of our image and bring it up, I can still go back to my previous grade and maybe bring my exposure up and maybe bring the gamma down as well, so I can start working. But another interesting thing that we have here is in my first vector, I can do another kind of trim pass. And I'm going to do that in bands. And I'm going to reset this for a second. So in bands, what I have is, like, again, we do have some ranges here. And I'm going to change the ranges and adapt them to my incoming signal. Let me show here to show scope from input. Okay, so nothing is messing with this. And over here, you can see I can set the black point, shadows, highlights, and white point to exactly the incoming information of the ACES CCT. And just as I had here, I could adjust maybe the midtones and add a little bit of an S-curve. And you can see here in the curves of, of the scopes how I'm actually manipulating the S-curve. And I'm not going beyond what we've defined as a white point, and I'm not going beyond what we defined as a black point, okay? It's really setting up the midtone contrast and doing that really nice S-curve shape on my signal. And again, as well, obviously, I could work with my trackballs and maybe add a little bit of a look here. And obviously, then we could also work with different saturation values for the signal, okay? So the really interesting thing of this is that I'd be grading this all in my HDR, in an SDR project, but just to prove a concept, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy the settings and bring them to an HDR stack. It's still ACES, okay? It will be an ACES, but as you can see here, this unique color effect, I've changed it. So I'm working on an output space of P3D65 1000 nits, okay? So that is my ODT that I'm delivering it to. Working space is still ACES CCT. Sorry, I slipped my tongue before. And my target delivery is going to be P3D65 1000 nits, okay? And it's over here that I just brought the same grade I was working on. Let me show this to you from here. Okay, and again, with the same tone mapping values. And if I wanted to, I could even do another trim pass and maybe change my contrast settings here because I don't want it to be maybe as contrasty in the HDR version. And obviously I have the ability to do that with the information that is incoming, okay? So that is it. And let's go back to maybe this close-up shot where, again, it's going to be a lot easier to show what we're doing. I'm going to bring back in my guidelines of the 200 nits diffuse white reference and my other reference for 1000 nits. And here what I've done is obviously the option that you saw me do an S-curve on the previous shot, but you still could do bring the white point further up if you wanted to within the bands and basically choose from here how that is done. You don't only need to do it in the primary where you have all these setups. You could also do it with the bands. And again, maybe with a soft clip, just adjust it to where you want it to. And you can see maybe these values over here would be around here. That is close to what a diffuse white would be, okay, with a slight red dominant there. But you can see that it's hitting around 140, 100, and well, even almost up to 200 nits, okay? We go here to a little bit to show the soft clip, but as I was saying before, you do have the bands, and in the bands you will have the different options to maybe do a trim pass specifically for HDR if you wanted to, okay? So, and obviously if the DOP is requesting it.
Absolutely. So do you combine ACES with Dolby? Some people seem, to think that you have to go one way or another.
Yeah, especially with the tone mapping involved in Dolby, people believe that, okay, I do my Dolby HDR and then do my SDR version from there. And that's, of course, the way to do it, and it's recommended. But we need to understand that this isn't either or, where you have to choose one option or the other. You can combine the two of them, and that is a winning, that's a winning scenario for production. And most of the platforms right now even recommend doing ACES workflow. We need to understand that one would be a means to an end. Okay, with ACES, you could define a color workflow and a system where different teams and different companies are all working with the same color management rules. Okay, and in a camera referred workflow, you would obviously have to define and design correctly all the transformations through LUTs and share them with all the corresponding teams as well. And basically making the question, yeah, you could definitely combine, as we've done here, Dolby Vision with an HDR grade. And you can see here, I've already done the analysis of this shot here. And you could perfectly combine and do the trim pass, and you just need to understand Dolby Vision is going to be the deliverable, and the master you will have to deliver that you're being requested. And ACES not only is going to be the system that will help you to deliver that HDR show, it also will guarantee, as long as you always do through the ACES standards, the longevity of your show and the option of repurposing your show to a different standard if a new standard comes in the following years, without having to manipulate the original data. You would just have to use the ODT. Okay, so just to show you how this was done, let me just play it for you. Okay. And well,
you know, Paco, this has been so great. I mean, we started on a regular Rec 709 signal, then we jumped into HDR, then working with ACES.
In combination with Dolby.
In the same timeline.
Yeah, and you would have the option of obviously seeing, and speaking of tone mapping, well, you'll have the option of going, seeing the result in HDR and Dolby Vision at the same time as well, okay? As you can see here in the stack, I could easily turn that off, okay? And you would be seeing again your HDR signal, okay? So it's an easy and convenient way of dealing with this, okay?
Absolutely. So as a recap, Paco, what are the main points that we have to keep in mind when designing color managed workflows in Mistika?
First, obviously, need to be actually careful with setting up your working space. And normally try to do the less number of transformations as possible. That's why over here we are directly doing it from the scene referred information from the camera and debayering it to red, white gamut RGB and the red log, the red 3G10, sorry. So set up the working space properly, and then obviously it is a matter of choice on how you want to work and how the production wants to work, or how whoever is involved in the project would want to basically manage the whole thing with different teams or anything. It really depends. But yeah, just obviously have your stacks. I actually would recommend naming them and have them clearly tagged, so it's easy to understand what you're doing.
Absolutely. So when do you think it's the best to start planning ACES workflow? Already in the production phase, or wait until the post-production?
Oh, well, I'm a huge advocate of ACES workflow, and I always default to an ACES workflow for multiple reasons. First of it, Most productions now are really VFX heavy, and VFX now, even most people feel that only blockbuster movies have VFX, and actually, no, it's quite the opposite. Almost every single show has VFX now.
Indeed.
And to help me manage the whole pipeline and to communicate correctly with other production companies, I default to ACES workflows. That's what I do because it makes it easier. And information is open, it's an open source, and even if someone has problems, I can go there and adjust the color management knowledge to the toolkit they're using. Okay, so that's it. But that's basically it. And yes, I would definitely recommend doing it in pre-production, although I know there's people that would say, well, no, that's a bit of an overkill or whatever. I really love setting up workflows where dailies and cloud dailies and editorial dailies all have the look burnt in from the beginning of the show. Even if later in post-production, it's obviously going to look different. But
Yes.
as long as it is helpful to manage, to show executive producers the intention that the DOP has from the very beginning and the director till the end of the show, I think that's a huge advantage and will obviously save a lot of time and discussions later on. And I'm actually going to show you here how we could do it. And precisely, I brought in this footage just to show you how we do this. I'm actually going to set this up into Rec 709 so you could see actually a nice image in our SDR monitors. And precisely, I brought this in so we could see a little bit how we could work with the highlights and start defining a look in our images before we go to shoot. And well, maybe one thing I would want to do here first is, okay, maybe let's just drop a little bit the exposure down. Okay, compensate a little bit for that red dominant, although there's loads of reds in the image. Okay, we could help ourselves with our pointer here to go to white point and clearly define, whoops, sorry, I'm manipulating the soft clip rather than the offset, sorry guys. Okay, so okay. And over here in the tone mapping is where I do have the values, as you've seen. This is an ACES CCT workflow. And I do have the trim that I spoke about earlier. Tone mapping or first tone mapping, okay, that could be useful. And a LUT if we wanted to use a LUT. And a second one if we wanted to, second tone mapping that we would do if we wanted to manipulate something after the LUT, okay? The trim values are just exactly what we did in bands before, okay? Cool. So let me reset this a little bit. So obviously we get a cleaner image. Gonna reset all this for a second, okay? And over here now, I will bring back my exposure up here.
So, Paco, we need to set the pivots and also the ranges in bands. So we expect a more familiar response of the signal with the color tools in Mistika, right? Because I've experienced big differences.
Well, the correct thing would be to the correct thing would be to say that you will adapt the pivot points to the incoming signal, so you can adjust and have a predictable result of the elements of the tools and the operators you are playing with. Okay. And precisely because of that is what we've been talking about. So, for example, here, in a scenario where I'm trying to develop a look for a show, and maybe I want to choose a LUT or something. I could use a film emulation LUT or whatever in ACES. And I don't know, let's just choose one over here. What it's going to help me, okay, let's see the difference there. We can see it's gone a lot redder, okay, with this universal LUT, but maybe let's choose another one. Let's go for Kodak Ektachrome, very similar. Maybe let's see if Provia here. Okay, this one is a little bit more contrasty. We could obviously here choose and then have the different options here and to play with and to select them. Okay, I'm gonna go for now with the Fuji 852, which actually has brought up a little bit my black point. And over here, precisely what you were talking about, Cristobal, is where we are going to define with the pivot points how those highlights and how we're going to work with that information in an ACES CCT working space, okay? And for example, here with my soft clip here, I do want to bring a little bit more information before the LUT, because I want the LUT to obviously have some influence there on the image, on those highlights, okay? And same thing over here with bands. What we could do is maybe if I don't want it to be too red, but I'm going to go with my midtones there, compensate a little bit for that. But yeah, let's add a little bit of an S curve there as well, okay? And maybe making it a little slightly more interesting there. Cool. And still maybe even manipulate a little bit those highlights over here after the LUT, because okay, maybe if we overcook it before the LUT and we don't want to do that, we really want it, okay, we do want to recover a little bit of that. You do have those options, and obviously this is really dependent on the LUT you're working with, and that's something you really need to be careful. But having the ability of obviously choosing the LUT you want to work and having different options, you could obviously manipulate the points differently as well. So over here, let's keep it with the one that we selected, the 8592 Fuji film emulation. And this is generally how we would prepare LUT before the show. But obviously, we would need to test that with a different set of tests here. This is a completely different approach, obviously, with different LUT. This is with the Fuji Provia, and basically the idea behind this is obviously choose and see how that LUT is going to behave on camera tests that were shot at different stops, okay, and see how skin tones react and everything, and play with that. There's something I forgot to show you, okay, because the gist of the whole, the whole production right now and broadcast and TV and film is actually doing this in HDR. So let me change this and let's see this in P3D 65 1000 nits. And again, I'm gonna show you there my guides here, and obviously here we could see on the previous one I go, okay, well, let's go, I want to be closer to the 200 nits, maybe reference there, bring the exposure up and dropping a little bit lift. But now in the tone mapping, let's see how the LUT reacts there on the signal. Okay, maybe it is actually dropping a little bit my highlights. So, well, let's say I really don't want that to be the case. I really want to be slightly aggressive there and really see those lights popping in my HDR screen. So that would be an option. But as I've encountered in the last 2 years of production, this reaction with highlights and lights and some light bulbs maybe behind a character, DOPs really try to tame them down because they don't want them to be distracting from the story. So you do have the option of doing that within Mistika and in the primaries just by dropping it down and saying, okay, let's bring it down to a point where it's less distracting to the story. And as you can see here, more or less where my diffuse white is, I can actually protect it a little bit more if I wanted to, if I bring up the value of the soft clip there. Okay, and I do have the option of bring it down. So you can see you do have the tools and the ability of shaping your ACES CCT signal to whatever you want.